Hello, everybody. Grab a drink of water here. It is Tuesday night. Hey, say Rain. Say Rain. Alfonso Williams, always in the house. Thanks, man. It is Tuesday night. It is around 9 p.m. Eastern, and I am in the library of Marshall McLuhan, where each week I try to spend a few hours in here with Dad's books. These last few weeks, since I started doing the Understanding Media intensive course, I've neglected the books a little bit. Well, that is, I've neglected the inventory a little bit in favor of the contents of a lot of the books, which you can see here around me. It's funny, I'm teaching Understanding Media, and so far I've used 20, 30 books as reference. Not too deeply, but they all come up. The course is going great. We just finished all the various context and introductions, and are this Saturday, digging into the meat of it with Chapter 1, The Medium is the Message, which I'm really excited to get into. So I'm in here prepping for that and doing some other things. Earlier I came across an article Marshall wrote in the New York Times Literary Supplement, Thursday, August 6, 1964. It's Marshall McLuhan, Culture and Technology. And I thought I'd read this because I doubt many people have ever seen it. I haven't seen it printed elsewhere. And it's really remarkable. It also ties in with Understanding Media because August 6, 1964 is just a few months after Understanding Media came out. So the material is fresh off the press. However, Marshall had been dealing with this material for 4+ years, but earnestly for several years at this part, and he's really moved past a lot of what he did in the book. Which is reflected in some of the things he says here, how he's taking things a step further even now, halfway through 1964. So I'll read this. It's not all that long, and I'll make a few comments on it, and that should take up our time for today. How about that? Does that sound good? Good. And you get to hear me attempt to pronounce a German word, so that's fun. Marshall begins the work of Adolf von Hildebrand, The Problem of Form, 1893, and of Rémy de Gourmand was typical of a great deal of new awareness concerning the nature of materials and their relation to the modalities of human perception and creativity. The new art and architecture and poetry of the 20th century had their roots in a new kind of perceptual discipline that centers in the awareness of style. In 1922, Middleton Murray's The Problem of Style, and members of the UMI course will know that came up last week. Problem of Style made quite explicit the relationship between style and perception, as well as the relation between art and the active training of sensibility. Recognition of technique became a program of discovery. In 1920, T.S. Eliot's essay on Massinger brought new stress to bear upon the language of a period in order to make it a means of perceiving the entire structure and values of a civilization. Quote, "These lines of Tourneur and of Middleton exhibit that perceptual slight alteration of language, words perpetually juxtaposed in new and sudden combinations, meaning perpetually eingeschadetlet into meanings, which evidences a very high development of the senses, a development of the English language, which we have perhaps never equaled." End quote. This is the kind of approach to language as the material of poetry that launched many of the artistic experiments of the 1920s, as well as the critical programs of the Calendar of Modern Letters and of Scrutiny. A lot of what he's referring to here is things like the style of criticism that Marshall encountered at Cambridge University with this book, Practical Criticism by I.A. Richards. Scrutiny is also a product of practical criticism, and this was one of these many books along these new styles of criticism, which are looking at the effect and at training of perception and sensibility. It is not only an attitude, but a method and a technique of grappling with all the materials and technologies of any human environment, so that if politics is the art of the possible, its scope must now, in the electric age, include the shaping and programming of the entire sensory environment as a luminous work of art. I'm just going to repeat that because if politics is the art of the possible, its scope must now, in the electric age, this is 1964, it must now include the shaping and programming of the entire sensory environment as a luminous work of art. He's saying politics must include this. From the Neolithic age, men had been engaged in creating technological extensions of their bodies in various fragmented and specialist forms, whether of script or wheel or housing or money. These extensions serve to amplify, but also to fragment human powers and faculties in order to store and to expedite knowledge and materials and processes, which is one of the main thrusts of understanding media, the extensions of man. It's all about this. Naturally, such amplifications of human powers greatly enlarge the means and incentives to violence and foster the enlargement of bureaucracy and enterprise alike. The break with the Neolithic age comes with electromagnetism and its derivative technologies. The electronic age is distinct from any other age. To back up a second. He's saying we didn't truly break from the Neolithic age until electromagnetism and the electronic age, which is something. The numerous extensions of hands and feet in the various forms of spindles and wheels and roads now begin to yield to the circuit and the loop, quote, where the hand of man never set foot, unquote. The immediate extensions of our nervous system by telegraph and telephone and radio and television not only usher us into a period when the codifying and movement of information supersede all other tasks in scope and in the creation of wealth, but they involve us totally in one another's lives. The extensions of our nerves and senses as they constitute a new man-made environment also require a wholly new kind of understanding of the sensory materials of this new environment and of the learning processes to which they are so deeply related. One of the discoveries of Baudelaire, and this was something that Marshall hammered on over and over and over, it's like so much has changed, and yet we're not changing the way we approach things in kind. We're still using machine age sensibility to try and do electric age things, and go figure, it doesn't work so well. One of the discoveries of Baudelaire and his followers concerned the means of relating the creative process in poetry to the stages of apprehension of human knowledge. Since Baudelaire, art has become coextensive with discovery and knowledge in every sphere of action and at every possible range of human development. And Baudelaire is, a key figure at this time of the discovery of electricity, electromagnetism, etc. The gap between art and technology has now ceased to exist. As we become cognizant of our art and technology as immediate extensions of ourselves, we have also acquired the responsibility of heeding the psychic and social consequences of such extensions. It is now many years since Mr. Eliot pointed to the effects of the internal combustion engine on poetic rhythms. Many forms of technology far more potent than the internal combustion engine have been assimilated to the rhythms of art and poetry and social life since that time. And one of, as we talked about in the last class, one of Marshall's ways of understanding what was happening in any age was to study the language, the art, the culture of the time as it reflects these changes. And we could certainly do that today. With the extension of the nervous system in electric technology, information not only moves in much greater quantity than ever before, but at very much greater speed than ever before. Paradoxically, the acceleration of information movement restores us to the habit of mythical and inclusive perception. Whereas data were previously fragmented by earlier forms of codifying information, the electric circuit has restored us to the world of pattern recognition and to an understanding of the life of forms which had been denied to all but the artists of the now receding mechanical age. And there, Marshall gets a lot from this book here. Marshall learned a lot from Eric Havelock in his book Preface to Plato, which talks about the effect of the alphabet on Western culture, and also what Western culture was like before the alphabet. Here we go. Our main concern today is with the patterns of the learning process itself, patterns which we can now see to be correlative with the processes of creativity. In the world of the organization of work, the electric revolution means the end of jobs. And he explains what he means there. That is, electric circuitry eliminates the fragmentation and specialization of the work process, which created the job type of work in the Renaissance and after. So he's not saying that we're no longer going to have things to do, but this style of work which we called a job is now over. The elimination of the job in the work process means a return to the depth involvement in role-playing, formerly associated only with arts and crafts. But now, in the age of information, the work process and the learning process become interfused. Automation, which means computers, automation is learning a living. Precisely the same kind of a revolution is taking place in the world of learning as in the world of work. Numerous centers, such as the Center for Culture and Technology at the University of Toronto, have recently come into existence. And at this point in summer of 1964, Marshall has only recently been given the Center for Culture and Technology at U of T. They are the response not so much to a theory as to a need and even to a pressure. It has long been known that in graduate studies, a research student crosses departmental boundaries as a matter of course. It's hard to imagine now, but back in the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, interdisciplinary studies, while very common now, was not really so much a thing. It was very frowned on. And, people were supposed to, not just students, but professors were supposed to stay in their disciplines. And this was a lot of the problems that Marshall faced were people resenting his encroaching onto their territory. Even today, that's true. People resent that Marshall supposedly turned Harold Innis from economic history to study of communication, or vice versa. You're supposed to stay in your lane. As access to all kinds of information becomes swifter, so does involvement in the pattern of every type of information. As an example, the Center for Culture and Technology, which exists by cross-appointments within the University of Toronto, is concerned to establish ways of quantifying the psychic and social consequences of every type of technology. This is really incredible to hear so many years later why the center was founded. It's moved on quite away from that, but that's neither here nor there. Center for Culture and Technology is concerned to establish ways of quantifying the psychic and social consequence of every type of technology. It is natural that the extensions of our senses technologically should have a direct effect upon the sensory usage and preference of any community. Many of these effects are quite incompatible with the continuance of older values. Marshall was a man on a mission. He really was. He wasn't just there to teach, he was there. He recognized changes in society and was actively trying to do something about it, which is incredible. This is media ecology in the mid-60s. Once a sensory typology has been established for a given population, therefore, it is possible to predict the effect on that sensory typology of any given new artifact, such as the motor car or television. That is to say, it becomes possible to control or to avoid kinds of innovation that are destructive of such established values as we prefer to retain. Marshall, being a literature professor, a lover of literature, was very concerned about post-literacy. And here he is saying that we need not, lose the things that we work so hard to achieve. However, a large measure of personal and social autonomy thus becomes possible across the entire spectrum of culture and technology, much in the way that we now have the means of thermostatic control of the thermal environment. A full understanding of the sensory typology of cultures on one hand, and sensory order and impact of art and technology on the other, affords the possibility of a human environment sensorily programmed for the maximal use of the human powers of learning. There you go. Marshall McLuhan, 1964. Thanks for being here and supporting the McLuhan Institute. Trying to stay with you across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram with things while still doing a lot of research for my students. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Take care.